couple times, and I had some. I kept making some technical errors. Same one, over and over and over again. But I have solved that problem. Thank you for the. Sorry about the afternoon live today. I know we normally go live at 11:15 a.m. Eastern, but I have thank you for the. Sorry about the after. Have some issues there on Substack again. Oh, come on, for fuck's sake! There we go. I have a guest today. Jacob Ward's going to be joining us in a few minutes. Jacob is located in California. Um, so, so it's just, if we were going, it's really, really early, and in the morning for him. So what we're going to be covering today, and by the way, I want to welcome Facebook in today. If you're joining us from Facebook, let me just make sure it's working. I just added Facebook to the stream today, so we now are. Hey, Trademark Shark, how are you? We're streaming from Substack, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So it's true multi-streaming today, my friends. So that's pretty cool. It took me. Hey, Ann, how are you? It took me a while to get here, to get to the point where I've got all these platforms integrated, but I've got them integrated. I'm not sure they're all working. I did check a few of them today. Facebook, I have to check. And our next goal, my friends, is to add Twitch. And I do see that Substack is bouncing in and out a little bit, so there may be some latency issues in the Substack. You just make sure it's not my area. There may be some latency issues in the Substack echo chamber. I don't see anything on my end that will be causing that. Hey, Catherine, how are you? So, guys, as soon as Jacob joins us, I'll bring him in. Should be here in just a couple of minutes. Been a while. Yeah, I'm doing well. Trademark, and I hope you're doing well as well. It's good to see you here. So, guys, this is going to be a just to kind of prep you for today's live. And once Jacob gets in, we'll kind of go over it again, and I'll formally introduce him. But Jacob is a seasoned technology reporter. He has experience in broadcast and in print. And he has covered for a long time the intersection between technology and politics. And that has never been, it's always been an issue. But I feel that it's never been more relevant, that beat that Jacob covers. I feel like it's never, Jacob is here. It's never been more relevant than it is today. Let me just bring him in. Hang on. Hey, Jacob. How are you, buddy? Can you hear me? I think you might be muted, Jacob. Or let me see if I've got you muted. Hang on. Let's see if it's on my end or not. Jacob, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm not, are you? Because I'm not. Hang on. I'm seeing a sound issue. Let me just check and see if it looks like the sound is streaming okay on my end. If you're able to hear me, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, so you can hear me, but for some reason I'm not hearing you. And you know what I think it is? I have a sneaking suspicion. Let me just see if it's a technical issue on my end. No, it's not coming through there either. Hang on, guys. Don't panic, anyone. It's definitely an issue on my end. Let me just pop into my settings. And I think I know what the problem is. I was exploring and experimenting with a headset recently, and I have a feeling that sound is going into nothing right now. So just bear with me, everyone. Sorry for the delay here, Jacob. Thanks for your patience. Let me see if I can find my sound here and my output. And no, it is. Everything looks good there. Jacob, you know what I'm gonna, because everything looks good on my sound on my end. It might be a little
Try
glitch.
your
Oh,
try
there
your
you are.
headphones one more time. Oh, we
You're
got it.
back.
Okay, great.
Yeah, you're back.
It switched me. It switched me off and back, and so now here we are. Great.
Oh,
We did
okay.
it. Sorry
We
about
did
that.
it.
That
Okay.
was me.
Thank you. Thanks for thank you for being here, Jacob. I so
Of course.
appreciate this. I was just kind of prepping everybody for this conversation. I've got to tell you, man, in preparation for last week, I was basically terrified after, I was reading about your reporting on ICE surveillance and prepping, and then, the war happened, and I knew I wanted to talk about that with you. I just wasn't sure where I wanted to go, and then I read your piece, um, and I'm terrified.
Yeah, I
So,
know. I know. I'm a real bummer to hang out with, is what I can tell you. This is
yeah,
sort of the way it goes for me. I have a lot of I ruin a lot of parties.
yeah. Well, and you've been on this beat for years. Um,
Yeah.
and on that, let me just introduce Jacob, and then we're going to get into this. I'm just going to read some stuff from your from the Rip Current. And by the way, Jacob has been a reporter on this intersection of technology and politics beat for a long time. I would argue he's the expert in the space. Jacob's covered technology, science, design, architecture for politics for NBC News, CNN, PBS, Al Jazeera. He spent 15 years as a writer and an editor for magazines like The New Yorker, New York Times, Popular Science, Wired, and many others. And now Jacob is, doing what so many journalists that we see here on Substack doing. He's sort of doing the independent journalism route because it looks like that's the future and the present of journalism. And so even before we go further, make sure you subscribe to Jacob's Substack. It's called The Rip Current. It may, if like me, it may scare the shit out of you at times, but we're going to bring Jacob on to talk us off the ledge after he terrifies us, for lack of a better term. So let's just get right into it, Jacob. I read your article, and I just want to read you a few quotes that stuck out at me,
Sure.
and then we'll kind of get into it. These are just random quotes that I took out of Jacob's article, and I just want you guys to hear this. So the same AI that the same AI the president had just declared a national security threat was running live targeting support as American jets flew toward Iranian airfields, according to the Wall Street Journal. This is no particular order, just random. This is an internal argument Jacob made in his book, The Loop. Once a system is embedded deeply enough in the infrastructure decisions, the humans nominally in charge lose real control. The President of the United States banned a piece of software. The software kept running a war. Just three more, guys. Autonomous weapons are intrinsically scalable, Russell argued, because they don't require a human to find the target or pilot target or pilot the weapon toward it. That means you can launch very, very large swarms of lethal machines, effectively creating a new category of weapon of mass destruction, which I wasn't thinking about that as the war started, or AI. But Jonathan brings that all together in this incredible piece of journalism that he wrote. I'm not even going to read the rest of them. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, as the rest of us woke up this weekend to the news that our nation had begun to strike Iran alongside Israel, for a lot of people, I think there was a strong feeling of there not being a lot of democratic input in that decision, and the recent polling is showing that the majority of Americans oppose that kind of intervention. Of course, as we know, President Trump campaigned on the idea that he would never get us into these kinds of wars and would get us out. So there's this feeling of unaccountability. And I would just say to people, try working the tech beat. because the lack of accountability that you experience when you begin to understand the companies at work that underpin so much of how modern war is fought, those companies really have so little accountability as it is. And as we saw last week, even an effort on the part of one of the companies themselves to try to police a little bit of how their technology might be used was railroaded. We got them railroaded by the government. So I'll give you that backstory. So as you know, there are four, I guess you could argue, big players in the AI space right now. And those are OpenAI, which is the creator of ChatGPT, Anthropic, whose product is Claude, Google, whose product is Gemini, and then you could argue that Meta has their Llama system, but I don't consider that sort of a competitor on an industrial scale in the same way. So those three are sort of the big players when it comes to government contracts. And what we saw last week was Anthropic, which is considered kind of the best of the bunch technologically, declared on Monday that it was not going to allow, it declared publicly, it had been declaring this privately, I guess, for some time, but declared publicly that it was not going to permit the Pentagon to use it for two particular purposes. One, the mass surveilling of American citizens, and two, killing people automatically through drones and other automated systems, using AI to make the kill decision. And they suddenly got into this public standoff with the Pentagon. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth declares that this is this, woke company trying to dictate terms, and that's not okay. And basically gave the company until Friday, this past Friday at 5:01 p.m., a deadline for handing over an unguardrailed AI system that they could do whatever they want with. And now, Mitch, we know why that deadline was Friday, is because this invasion was going to happen that night. And clearly, Anthropic's products were already baked into the battle plans in a way that they needed to be able to keep using them. So, on the one hand, you could look at that and say, and the sort of the top line read of this, and I think the read that probably Anthropic was hoping everybody would have, is a principled company standing up against an unprincipled administration. What I would point out, however, is that Anthropic, alongside OpenAI and Google, last year, 2025, was working its ass off to get a contract with the Pentagon, to be part of the war effort, to be part of the military-industrial complex, and joined up on these federal contracts through a program run by Palantir. Palantir was their chief partner in this. I noticed that my end of this conversation is getting a little squirrely. Are you able to hear me okay and see me okay?
Keep going, because I think we need this, because there's so much news that I didn't even cover. Great. Anthropic. I haven't talked about it. It's impossible to keep up with this. This is one of the reasons I really wanted you on today, because we need to hear the backstory. And I guarantee you the folks here want to know it. So just keep going.
Sure. Okay, good. Okay. So the long story short here is that these three companies, the top three AI systems that you probably use in your daily life if you work a white collar job, those three have been fighting their butts off to be deeply embedded in the Defense Department as much as possible. And each of them has gotten a $200 million contract with the Pentagon. And Anthropic was the first one built deep into the highest classified level, the highest security clearance level of the Pentagon. And so the Pentagon really needed their technology and was excited about their technology because it makes all kinds of things possible. We can talk in a second about what kinds of things it does make possible. So Anthropic, as one former Palantir person put it to me, made their own bed on this problem. They got into bed with the Pentagon, then after the fact decided to try to impose a couple of standards that it felt were not okay, and suddenly found themselves in this debacle in which they were held to their feet to the fire by the Pentagon around this stuff. So, to finish off the events of last week, after much back and forth in which Anthropic's CEO and co-founder, a guy named Dario Amodei, issues these public statements saying we're not going to back down, we think these are really important red lines, then competitors from employees of the competitors of Google and OpenAI sign a big open letter that say we stand with Anthropic and we also don't want our companies to capitulate in this way. At the last second, about an hour before the Friday deadline, President Trump declares that this company is persona non grata. They are kicked out and won't be allowed to be used by any federal agency, not just the military contract that they've lost, but any federal agency, which is a big problem for a company. And even with all of these signatures from important people inside these various companies, and even though Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI and Dario Amodei's fiercest rival, even though he had publicly said he stands with Anthropic about it, turns out that guy had been negotiating all along with the Pentagon to replace Anthropic if push came to shove. Push did come to shove, and now OpenAI has replaced them, has stepped in to the breach and replaced Anthropic as the AI of choice at the highest level. That has created an enormous consumer backlash. OpenAI cancellations, the cancellations of ChatGPT have been through the roof, and suddenly Anthropic's product Claude has surpassed OpenAI as the #1 downloaded app on the App Store. Their servers actually crashed yesterday, I think, because of that demand. And so what we've seen is an AI military industrial complex that had been sort of bubbling along in secret for quite a while, not quite in secret, but under the radar, certainly. Suddenly had this little sort of fight about principles, and I would argue that those two standards, not killing Americans, not surveilling Americans, and not killing people automatically, are pretty low standards. But okay, those standards became the sort of the flashpoint of Anthropic getting into trouble with the government. And the big thing that I would just say, and then I'll let you jump in here, Rich, is in my world, I'm used to technology companies and the heads of technology companies saying, when I ask them things like, hey, you've built this very scary new piece of technology, have you come up with the ethics that should govern that technology? They typically say, that's not my job. It's up to the government and to democracy to sort that stuff out. I just build the tools and society will figure it out. Well, we're suddenly in this weird upside down world where the government is no longer imposing any kind of standards and isn't really responding to democracy particularly well. And it has now fallen to the companies to come up with what very few standards it'll have about the military use of the technology. And so for me, it's this big ball of very undemocratic, a real lack of accountability. And it's part of the theme that I've been covering basically my whole career.
Yeah, and it's it's chaotic because we had that executive order right back whenever, like maybe I don't know if it was the beginning of the administration, right? But of the plethora of 200 some odd executive orders that came out, and one was the order that was supposedly ordering every state couldn't regulate AI in any capacity for a decade, right? And then so that leads to this. Now, just one quick question for clarification for me. What didn't the CEO? Well, two questions. It might be three. Didn't the CEO? I can't remember his name of Anthropic. He said that on the one hand, the regulatory structure wasn't there. I don't know if I have these mixed up, but I think for the surveillance purposes. But on the other hand, that he didn't think the AI was there for the, in terms of the evolution of the technology for the weapons, using them the way I guess the Pentagon wants to use them in weapons. Mm-hmm. First of all, do I have those two things mixed up, or is that? No,
really? It's about right. I mean, so what he was saying was, he said two things. He said basically that the using AI to target people and decide whether to kill them, he said that the AI is not ready for that, which is a big thing for a guy at the top of an AI company to say. That's the pressure that a guy in that position would feel to make it sound as if his company can do anything. right, would be is enormous. But he managed to say out loud, "I don't think my system can be used for this. I don't think it should." And then he, with the mass surveillance thing, the point he was making, which is a subtle one, and it's one that I've heard many critics argue over time, and I've come to believe it myself, is that so there is a form of mass surveillance that could draw on publicly available data, people recorded conversations in public spaces, if we were to choose to put microphones everywhere, and even short of that, just the commercial databases that are currently out there, that the government could conceivably use to vacuum up an incredible amount of data, analyze it using AI tools, and arrive at a designation for people of, dissident, troublesome journalist, right? There could be all kinds of creepy authoritarian ways you could use that. And his argument was, you can do that without, in theory, running afoul of current law. And the Pentagon has made the case all along that it wanted to be able to use these AI tools in all lawful ways. It kept coming back to the phrase, all lawful uses. We want to be able to use it in all lawful ways. But as you know, there are an enormous number of really scary and, I would argue, ethically unacceptable uses of this stuff that don't run afoul of our current laws. I've been referring to these as kind of future crimes, because they're things that should be criminal, because any reasonable person would look at it and be like, that's not cool, but the current legal structure doesn't outlaw them. So that's the complication.
I see. I just want to interrupt you for a second, Jonathan. Gail, so you got no sound there. Is it everybody? Somebody else, please let me know too, Gail. I would just want to make sure see if it's just on your end or if it's if it's across the board. There's been some weird latency stuff going on with the feed as well. So so anybody else, just let me know if you can hear me. Although I think it may be just you, Gail, because I'm not hearing from anyone else. But I'll keep an eye on the chat, guys, and let me know if their sound is sort of crapped out on the chat in general. Okay, so Tina, you have sound. Oh, yeah. So Gail, I may just be, you may want to just kind of bounce out and bounce in, because I think there's some weirdness going on with the feed on and off. So I would just, and I'm going to get to the Iran stuff specifically and back to your article, but I just want to drill into one more thing. The comment, though, that the tech is simply not there, right, for the killing people, right? Even if we set aside the ethical and legal arguments, right? But Altman from OpenAI, as you said, jumps in right afterwards, and I feel like, to the extent that I follow AI coverage, I don't know. Altman doesn't seem. He seems like, he doesn't strike me as the most ethical guy, in the space. I don't know that. He strikes me as an opportunist, and sometimes he seems really nice when he's in an interview, and then I read articles about him and he seems less nice, so I don't really know where he's at. But if are we in a situation now where we have obviously a reckless administration? You got Pete Hegseth, who is clearly unfit for the job for a plethora of reasons, and I don't think he knows much. Just in terms of what he needs to know, and aside from his male toxicity and a thousand other things that trouble me about him, the president clearly doesn't know anything. So are we in a situation, to your knowledge, where we've got these guys, right, that really want this tool, this toy, and for, they're the wrong people for a whole bunch of reasons, but the tool isn't ready. It's like something you'd see in a movie, right? The tool isn't ready, but the bad guys who really want the tool are going to get it from anybody who might give it to them. And then if they implement, if they get the tool, depending on how Altman responds to the pressure, I think I saw some reporting today that he regretted.
He's backtracking publicly wildly because his company is suffering, because people are canceling their subscriptions. That's right.
So maybe he wants revisions to the contract, but I can't imagine the Trump administration that doesn't back down unless Trump's polling is bad, or whatever it is
And
that.
it turns out that doesn't even seem to matter.
That's
very much anymore.
whatever it
Yeah.
is that occasionally gets him to back down. But are we in a situation where somebody is going to give them stuff that isn't ready, and things are going to go really wrong? To simplify this.
Yeah, right. I mean, so I guess what I would say is one of the complicated things about the opinions that I've come to form in this space is there's one in particular that I've always really struggled to articulate. So I'm going to try it with you here, and let's see how we do. But there is a temptation in looking at tech like this, like AI, like targeting systems, like facial recognition, the rest of it, to focus on whether or not it works in a way that where we want to say, well, this thing isn't as good as they say. It misidentifies faces, or it might kill the wrong person every so often. And I have learned in my world that it is actually more constructive in terms of getting to like ground truth ethical questions to assume that it's going to work perfectly, because the motivation of these companies and the incredible productivity systems that they have built means that they tend to iron stuff out pretty quick. And so in my world, when people say, oh, you can tell the difference between an AI generated piece of political propaganda and another because there's like 6 fingers, on the guy in this photo, I go, wait 2 quarters, wait 2 financial quarters. They're going to have that ironed out. Instead, what I choose to think about is, what are going to be the effects on all of us and on our ethics if this stuff works perfectly? And in the case of these technologies, Israel has already been revising the use of AI systems for targeting for a long time. And their lab has been Gaza. So they have been using AI targeting systems that use all sorts of video footage, satellite footage, surveillance technologies, combine it with AI to pick out patterns in this stuff, find the patterns in somebody's life, where they live, where they go, where they do, the things that they do. And as a result, say, well, at this time of day, on this, particular day, he's going to be, here at this office. Let's kill him there. AI systems have been refined already in this outing against Iran, our closest military ally. And so what I then invite us all to think about is, okay, let's say this stuff works perfectly, and you can choose somebody perfectly, and you can kill them in just the place that you intend to, and you can send a drone to do it. You don't have to put a pilot in harm's way. You don't have to put a group of people on the ground with guns and boots. You can just kill that guy from the comfort of your armchair. What do we want in that world? Do we want that, right? And are our elected officials ready to bother themselves with questions of ethics and restraint? Because I think that what's going to be the defining challenge for us as a society in the next 20 years is whether we can voluntarily reintroduce some friction into our decision making and into our lives, because it's going to be such a frictionless environment if we choose to make it so, where you don't have to write a wedding vow, you don't have to, look, and you don't have to look a guy in the eye when you kill him. Are we willing to pull a little bit of friction back into our lives so that we can reactivate our ethics a little bit? Because and as you probably saw in the piece, I quote this guy, Stuart Russell, who's been thinking about this stuff a long time. And his argument for years has been, once we make it as simple as using autonomous drones to kill people, the psychological and political cost of killing people is going to be so vanishingly small, it won't be a barrier any longer. And that's what I worry we're about to see in Iran, as we've seen in Gaza, and as I think we're going to see all over the world in future.
That's the terrifying stuff.
Here we go. Sorry, everybody.
And if at
Enjoy
different
your
points
coffee.
you think I'm fishing for hope, it's because I'm fishing for hope.
We'll get there. I got a little hope at the end for you.
You'll hear. That's why the community is called Zenocracy. The Zen part, helps me deal with my fear of losing democracy right now.
Yes.
So taking that as a great segue where you just were to the war that we're dealing with right now. You talk about in your piece, you get pretty specific too about what's literally how Claude, right? That's Anthropic's AI.
Yep.
So let me just kind of set it up, and then if you could kind of, extrapolate on it. So basically, Trump says he gets, Trump gets mad because everything is emotional, it's reactive. The government's no longer using Anthropic tools, they're banned to the point where all like you say, the contractors are banned, which I read an interesting bit from just an interesting social media post. How does that affect, say, NVIDIA that supplies chips for Anthropic? What's that, because that could literally be the end of Anthropic's business, at least from what I read, if they can't buy NVIDIA chips anymore. But, so Trump bans everybody, right? It's banned. But then, these systems, Claude is integrated into, I don't remember what you said in the piece, but is integrated into what we're doing right now in Iran.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there's this ridiculousness, right? That the product that's been banned is actually being used.
Yes.
And that's
right,
not,
because
if Trump wasn't the president, that might be a thing, right? But because we're used to this, we're numb to this, it's kind of like it's not even going to make a sub headline.
Right.
But what's going on? What exactly in terms of the weaponry that the U.S. is using, exactly what is happening with Claude? And then the second thing is you talk about, and I love this part of the piece, where we're shooting the same, we're shooting the same $35,000 missiles at each other, the Iranians and us. And I know they're not completely related, but it's such great journalism, but it's also really good storytelling, So
well, I appreciate that.
Cover those two.
Yeah, so the way that AI is being used now in this operation, which, speaking of toxic masculinity, Operation Epic Fury, it's called, right? The dignity of our code names is always amazing. So it's very much a parallel to how Israel has been using this stuff in Gaza. So it is target identification, right? They undoubtedly were feeding huge amounts of surveillance information into it to understand where Khomeini would be, where his leadership would be, where Ahmadinejad would be, right? They have vast amounts of data to deal with that. And I should point out here that this is not just Anthropic, this is also Palantir, which is the sort of the big brother who kind of introduced Anthropic, Google, and OpenAI to the government and made it possible for them to work together. Basically made it possible for those guys to get the security clearances they need to even be part of this stuff. So Palantir is kind of the like contractor in a way, the general overseeing contractor, and all these guys have their function.
But Palantir is not a they don't have a product though, right? An AI.
Oh, they
product.
do. They do too.
Okay.
No, they all do. Everybody's selling a product. And so what made Palantir famous, the reason Palantir is so deeply embedded in the government, the thing that they first made years ago that was so helpful to the government and got them in the door was in Afghanistan. They were trying to basically figure out what to do with these reams and reams and reams and reams, just hours and hours and hours and hours of drone footage they had, right? You could circle a thing forever, be on station forever, watch everybody in this compound, but you had to have like a team of caffeinated humans sitting there being like, there he is again. What Palantir devised was essentially a search engine for video, so that you could say, see this guy with this turban? I want him everywhere he goes. And then the Palantir system would be able to start pulling him out of other pieces of video and stitching them together. What Anthropic makes possible is the taking of this incredibly disassociated cloud of data and pick out patterns in it that a human could never find. To say, oh, well, not only is he here in all of these different videos, he tends to do this on Tuesdays, or he tends to be over here with this many people. He tends to have a security detail this big. It can answer questions the same way it can look in your, the randomness of your pantry and say, here's the stuff you could make tonight for dinner, right? It is fantastic at assimilating huge amounts of disassociated data. And so it is undoubtedly being used now in the targeting selection process. It also does things like simulating battle scenarios. So typically you have to have a huge room of military nerds figuring out, okay, if we move this here, how much fuel will it require to do this? And then how many of these missiles will we have to do? And how many will we have left? And blah, blah, blah. They now have these systems that can simulate, thousands and thousands of battle scenarios in a matter of a couple of hours, whereas once upon a time, one of them would have taken 48 hours of planning. And so that kind of thing, in which it's both intelligence assessment, target selection, and battle scenario simulation. I'm sure that the reporting is that all of those are cooked in, and it's one of these things where you can kind of get lost in this circular logic of the president declaring this thing a national security threat, but then insisting that it be part of the plan, and now it turns out it's still being used in the plan. I would invite everybody to just kind of like put all of that aside, recognize that that's simply just a reaction to the fact that this one company said, there are a couple aspects of how this could be used that we just aren't really comfortable building. And that's where the federal government, says, oh yeah, go F yourself. You don't get to dictate our terms at all. And I would just say, like, the argument that a company can't dictate terms to its military client is ridiculous. Like, Elon Musk's been doing it for years in his engagements with the Russians and the Ukrainians. Starlink, his system, he slaps all kinds of limitations on that for the military use of this stuff. And I believe there's even some reporting that he slapped a bunch of restrictions and conditions onto the military use in the United States. So, this is not a thing to say that this company is being outrageous to make these demands. But again, it's more about the way in which a battlefield scenario, the battlefield environment invites everybody to, first of all, just kind of abandon their fundamental sense of decency. We'll strike these hospitals to cripple the on the ground infrastructure and blah, blah, the kind of horrific decision making that's going on anyway is being so easily facilitated by this technology that that's the slippery slope that I'm worried about. And then you mentioned these Iranian drones. So Iran, I think just yesterday, put out this weird video that was it's like a car ad. It's like this very slick video that shows these Shahed drones sort of parked in this cave in this very creepy way, and it's like somebody's got like a steady cam and it's like showing this car lot of drones. It's a weird thing, but it's clearly out there to say, look how many drones we've got. And these are these unmanned sort of kamikaze drones that go and have been landing on, in Bahrain and UAE and all these places and exploding. And they cost about $35,000. It's like a mid-priced car. And it turns out the United States, in this same operation, has been debuting a system called Lucas, which is an unmanned, automated drone. The Lucas drone, it stands for Low Cost Unmanned Combat Attack System, and it's a one-way attack drone, literally reverse engineered from the Iranian Shahed. So we're literally shooting these $35,000 cars at each other.
That is,
it's this. So this is the thing: it's the commodification of war.
Yeah. And it's cheap, right? Like when we talk about 35,000, I'm so glad you brought it up because I would have forgotten about it. And I want to show. I pulled that link out of your article because I knew because you got to see it. So I just want to. I'm going to share this. I want to share this. This. Let me just pull that scene up. Right. So here's the. Let me just run this. Hang on. So here's the scene. Just watch this, guys. This is something to see.
Literally, it's like Now, new low prices on,
Yes.
like,
And Jacob makes the point in his article that although obviously this is a propaganda, this is a propaganda film,
yeah,
that this is also an inventory. This is really what they've got.
that's right. I mean, each of those things delivers something like a 500-pound explosive payload that, not 500 pound. It can travel 500 miles, and it delivers this incredible explosive yield. Those things are extremely they're very, very scary. And so there's just like all of our assumptions about how weaponry sort of works. I mean, one of the things I mentioned, this guy Stuart Russell, he's a academic out of UC Berkeley. He was one of the original inventors of AI. I mean, he was an early thinker on this stuff. And his worry about autonomous drones, as he put it to me in an interview I did with him years ago, was you don't need the resources of a nation state to bring this kind of technology to bear. You really just need the resources of a mid-sized company to pull this stuff off. And so once upon a time, there was built-in friction and restraint in making war because it involved putting people in harm's way, which is an unaffordable cost. It involved building enormously expensive things nobody but a nation could afford. And now we're in the realm of $35,000 self-flying, killer robots. And so the restraint is disappearing in this way that's the part that I find really alarming.
Well, and to take that a little further, you mentioned in your article, I know it's not the drones, but the software, in terms of the simplicity of it. I mean, this is I guess a negative for the Trump administration, but the fact that the software is dictating the terms of engagement right now because Trump said you can't use it, but yet because it's so embedded and integrated into the systems now, you can use it, and
yep.
And I know that's not a direct correlation to sort of the simplification of killing, but it strikes me as a little bit of a part of it because you don't even have to, you don't even have to, police your, how am I trying to say this? If you're trying to police the product, one of the products that you're using, but you can't even just take it offline because it's, it's fully integrated into your weapon systems, and
right,
and it's too easy to use. I mean, it
is, and it removes expertise and accountability from the people involved. And this is a theme that I've been exploring for a long time. So I have this book called The Loop, how AI is creating a world without choices and how to fight back. And in it, I have a million different stories about people incorporating this kind of automatic decision-making system into their process, and then suddenly finding that they can't make decisions anymore and don't even have what they need to make to second guess the decision that the automated system is handing them. There's people whose SNAP benefits, whose welfare benefits are being denied them, who then need to be able to sue to say, listen, you've wrongly denied me these benefits. It's a mistake clearly in your system. And it turns out nobody inside the state agency can tell them why the automated system made that choice. Nobody who makes the automated system could tell them why they made that choice. And, they have to find pro bono lawyers to take it all the way to an administrative court to get any kind of remedy because there's nobody who will pick up the phone anymore. Right. And this is the thing that I worry we're going to see across society, and we're already seeing it sort of across the military, is that people are going to be like, well, I don't know why it chose that guy, but I don't want to put my shoes on, so go ahead and kill him.
And there won't be any, there may not be any accountability either, right? So
that's right, because I didn't kill him. The drone killed him. The AI system made the choice.
Yeah, because if you remember, I'm going to segue because I know we're getting a little up there in time, and I want to segue to the surveillance, ICE surveillance stuff. But actually, let me do that because I'm going to go on a tangent, and I know I'm going to start talking about the other stuff. So I'm just looking at some of my notes from before, and I want to start out with the ICE surveillance stuff, with your interview with Ali Velshi. That's where I really kind of when I took a look at, I don't have clips of that interview because I just wanted to kind of talk it through with you, but man, there's a lot of stuff, right? That they're using. And let me just throw some of this out and have you extrapolate it. You tell this story about in 2014, after Velshi kind of tells you about like, he reports on what's happening in the moment, and you're like, well, this has been going on for a long time, Ali.
Yeah.
And first you tell this story about 2014 in Ukraine, where I guess everybody had their cell phones.
Yep.
And can you tell us that story? Because again, this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's a nice segue into the surveillance.
Yeah, sure. I was working at Al Jazeera at the time, and we were covering the original Ukraine protests in Kyiv, where clearly FSB agents were infiltrating the crowd, and clearly Russia was hell-bent on taking Crimea. And this was the first time that everyday Ukrainians sort of set up this big kind of encampment in Kyiv to protest against this. And during those protests, which were very medieval, there was a lot of really scary stuff going on there, and having to build barricades. I mean, it was real Les Mis kind of stuff. They found that the cell phones of people there were receiving very scary text messages that say, you have been registered as a dissident or a protester or a criminal for being in the protest you're in. And it was the first time that we had seen anybody using the technology known as geofencing, where you can spot the specific location of a cell phone based on how it triangulating off of multiple towers. And in this case, capturing that system to basically propagandize these protesters and intimidate them. And at the time, I remember thinking, wow, this is like the beginning of how, sort of the crushing of dissidents is going to work, is this kind of getting into our cell phones. And now we are way past that, into this realm in which there is not only the ability to capture your phone. You have these systems called stingrays that are very commonly used by police departments now, that basically impersonate a cell phone tower and trick your phone into registering with them rather than with the cell phone tower, and handing over information about your phone that lets them then begin to track you and can do all kinds of things. There's technology, again, out of Israel, that's been built to specifically like gain access to your phone remotely, not even having to physically have the phone, where you can essentially trick the phone, send a text message that the owner never even sees, and it suddenly gets onto the phone and begins just having watching you live, basically, as you do whatever you do on your phone. And then there's, the point that I make to everybody is like, the reason that these ICE agents cover their faces is because they know what you can do with an unmasked face. One of the systems that's been going around for years, since before COVID, is called Clearview. And it's a software package that basically scrapes any photo of Mitch Ivan from any corner of Facebook, and uses it as a comparative database for any other picture that the police might have captured of you. So it's essentially an all-in-one facial recognition system, that you take a picture of this guy when you see him in a protest, and all of the other places that guy's faces have appeared on social media tell you who he is. So Clearview does this very simple thing of connecting those things together. And you can then the really creepy thing is that as we're getting beyond just simple facial recognition, we're getting into areas like the Special Forces has a system that they've been working on and are supposedly pretty close to being able to deploy reliably, which is heartbeat recognition. From 200 feet away with a laser, they can watch your heartbeat. And supposedly your heartbeat and mine are so unique that they are in fact more useful as an individualized identifier for us than facial recognition. And they work better over time than facial recognition do. As I get older and droopier, it gets harder to recognize me. But my heart stays pretty constant throughout my life. And you can't cover it with a mask. You can't leave it at home, right? It's with you all the time. So the invasiveness of this stuff is so incredibly powerful. And again, like, there are some Fourth Amendment protections that in theory are supposed to give us some safety and security against this stuff. But the harvesting of data that we have given over to a social media platform, as we have been tricked into doing for so many years, arguably that's it. And when I interviewed the CEO of Clearview at one point and asked him, "Hey man, what the fuck?" was basically my question. He said, I said, do you think that parents who put their kids' faces on the internet understand that they are doing so such that police will then have them in a facial recognition database for all time because of your product? And he said, yeah, I think so. I think that people who put their faces on the internet understand they're giving up their right to privacy.
Wow.
And that is, I think, the fundamental assumption of so many of these companies is if you're willing to be part of our platform, then you've given up your right to privacy. And as a result, the police have every right, as anybody does in the US, to buy commercial data that these companies provide. And that's it for being anonymous on the streets of America.
Yeah, and we've gotten so used to when we install a software program or go into a social media site, just saying yes, yes, yes to whatever disclaimers they have, because who's going to read it and
that's right.
Just assume it'll be fine.
And you don't get to negotiate. You don't get to say, you know what, Tim Cook, I've got some questions about this contract. That's right.
So, Velshi, and you've mentioned some of them, because I want to say specifically what ICE has, right? You've mentioned some of them, but let me just read off a bunch of them, because when you were having your discussion with him. Facial recognition, mobile fortifying, cell and phone location database. You mentioned stingrays.
Yep.
I can't read my handwriting here. That's commercial brokers you talked about. That's where we've given up our data, right?
That's right.
Like my wife gets upset with me all the time because when I go to Whole Foods, I use the hand recognition thing.
Right.
And she's like, "Why are you doing that?" But
the other one that people don't realize that they're playing into that system is Venmo. Venmo's the feed, right? When I pay my barber on Venmo, I can see all the other people that have paid her that day. It doesn't necessarily say what they've spent, but it says they paid it. That turns out to be a great way to track the patterns of life of somebody, which is why a lot of undocumented people know not to accept Venmo. And they use systems like Zelle or Cash instead because they don't want to be hoovered up by that. So yeah, these are that agency has taken great advantage through Palantir, which again is the sort of the umbrella software organization for all of these things, of commercial databases that we've been feeding our stuff into for decades at this point.
And this percept, I mean, when I talk about the ICE agents because of their behavior and sometimes their lack of training, I often will refer to them, and just because I'm mad or I'm angry in a particular moment about what's going on, I will refer to them as a confederacy of poorly trained buffoons. And I think there's some truth to that, but clearly when you mentioned that they're putting their masks on, it's not just to, the conventional wisdom with the pro-democracy folks is it's to intimidate us and to not hold them accountable for crimes they commit. Sure. The conventional wisdom or lack thereof with the pro-autocracy folks is they're being doxxed and they're being outed and everything else. But you threw in this interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about, and it's that they know. They know they have all of this stuff and they're using it. They're not necessarily the confederacy of buffoons I think they are, because they know enough to know that when they, and I didn't really understand this, but when I see these clips on social media of some ICE agent, holding up his or her phone to a migrant and then cuffing them, they know that with the system that they're using.
That's exactly right. And, I would say, I can't speak to the training of ICE agents, although I've seen the reporting as well that suggests that they're not being trained as thoroughly as they need to. But I would say just overall, directionally, the effect of these kinds of systems is that it just doesn't take as much investigative work as it used to identify somebody.
Right.
And because the Supreme Court has now said that the burden of proof isn't necessarily on ICE, and that they get to simply grab somebody because of the color of their skin. You combine that with the opportunity to simply grab somebody, photograph them, and run them through this database. You're no longer an investigative agent. You're just a sample collector.
Oh wow,
And that's kind of where we're at with that's what the technology makes possible. So for me, it's this general slide away from initiative and accountability and expertise and toward a kind of, well, I just work here kind of attitude that everybody's going to be, I think, under pressure to take as these tools metastasize throughout our society. We're seeing it in white collar work. We're seeing it in the, the service business. We're seeing it in law, and increasingly we're seeing it in law enforcement and the military. And it's a thing we're really going to have to reckon with, because the natural restraint that used to be built into human beings, because it just took work to do stuff,
right,
is going away, and we're going to have to reckon with that.
and it's sort of like and I'll sort of wrap with, I have one more question for you, but it's sort of like a perfect storm, because we have this pseudo-authoritarian administration that is more than willing to use it. And are we at two last questions for you, and thanks for taking all the time. I know I'm going
Sure.
kind of far here.
I love it.
Is it that we just happen to hit this just awful inflection point by fate, that America was dumb enough to reelect Donald Trump and the technology got where it was, so that this group of people could take advantage of it? Or is that the tech was there, and we just didn't have anyone, we didn't have an administration. Maybe the first Trump administration, there were some guardrails in the White House. But the tech was already there. We just weren't in a situation where it was going to be used against us. And then the second part of that question is that I know a lot of the folks on this call are wondering about. Are these tools that ICE is using against migrants going to be used against citizens? And has it been?
Right. So I guess I'll take your second question first. So this we are already seeing that people that the police want to arrest later for misbehavior at a protest. I interviewed a guy named Derek Ingram, who was arrested at after a No King's Day protest. He shouted through a bullhorn at an officer at point blank range. The NYPD seemed to sort of take kind of offense at that. It was not clear that he had, that his behavior was any worse than anybody else's, but this was one that the NYPD really took personally. And they brought out everybody to go arrest that guy at his house later, at his apartment. And the news footage of the arrest showed a watch commander standing there with a Clearview AI printout that had his name and the reference photos that had been used to identify him. And then it says at the top, and this is the part that is so important, right, is it says not to be used as primary evidence or something like that. It's one thing that these companies always say is this shouldn't replace investigative judgment. This should be just a supplement to your investigative techniques. But of course it's not. It's become primary. So there's a slide into the use of this stuff that is, I think, absolutely going to touch every American, not least because we don't have any data privacy laws in this country. We don't have any data transparency laws in this country. We don't get to know anything about what companies that have collected our data all this time are doing with it, or who they're giving it to. There's no rules around that. And so that is so the answer to your question is yes, it is absolutely going to be used on American citizens. I think it's already being used on American citizens. So, and if anything, like we've been surveilled by companies for years. I mean, people are literally buying listening devices and putting them in their own homes and saying, "Hey, Alexa, do this, do that." I mean, if Orwell knew that we had been buying spyware and putting it in our own homes for fun, whoa, his head would pop off. So then this question of why now? And are these the guys that just got lucky, or was there something else going on? I would say that they got lucky in the commercialization of this technology, really taking hold on their watch. And I think that there's something we've really learned, and this is a real theme of the reporting that I've been doing lately, of this sort of intersection of power and politics and technology. I think that once upon a time, it was the fashion, and it was nothing more than fashion, I think, to be progressive and ethical about how you ran your tech company, because you had to recruit young people. You couldn't bring young kids in unless you could do that, unless you could show that they were progressive and you were all trying to improve the world. Now that's not the fashion anymore. And these tech leaders are showing up for Trump's inauguration and giving him $1 million each for his ballroom. And they are learning that it is far better to play along with his cabinet than it is to push back against them. And the thing that I am most disturbed by, and then I'll end on a note of hope here, because I
was hoping you. I was hoping.
I will. I know.
I'm ready to throw my Alexas out.
I know, dude. Throw it away. I highly recommend that.
I'm ready to just surrender.
Don't let them listen in on you if you can help it. There's a famous interview with Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, from beginning of 2024, in which he was saying that there's a bet he has going with his tech CEO friends that they have some WhatsApp channel or something that they all are on some group chat with. And they have a bet going as to when we will see the first one-person billion-dollar company, which is what the dream that they have for what the efficiencies that their product will make possible. And clearly they think that's the coolest thing ever. And never mind the fact that I think that's going to lead to total economic ruin for the vast majority of humans.
Right.
Think also about, once upon a time, the pressure that you were under from the youngest people on your staff to be progressive was one of our best democratic inputs into these companies, was the values of young people were holding the leadership to account. But if we've only got one guy working there, he's not accountable to anybody. He doesn't have to get along with anybody. He doesn't have to reconcile his weird totalitarian libertarian ideals with the young people who see that the world shouldn't be that way. And so I think there is something we're learning about the DNA of the kinds of folks that build these companies that turns out to jive pretty well with the authoritarian leanings of the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, part of why we're seeing the synergy here. Okay, note of hope, and then we'll cut it, and then we'll cut it loose. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, so one of my great complaints about tech is always that there just isn't democratic input. For one thing, as you mentioned, you don't get to fight back on the terms of service. It's yes or no, right? And you don't get to nobody you're not going to say no once you've bought the phone. So there's this feeling that there isn't a lot of input. But I am very encouraged that, for instance, OpenAI has fallen off the charts on the App Store, and that Anthropic and Claude have replaced them. There is clearly an anger at the idea that the same tech you're using to, cheat on your homework, is being used to target Iranian civilians. People don't like that. And there's clearly a reckoning around that currently is playing out in the use of money, in how people are spending their subscription money. But that I think some smart, probably Democratic politician is going to harness going forward. Because I think there is going to be a way of saying, these guys you didn't elect are controlling your life. Andrew Yang tried to do that. He tried to make the case that we should be all thinking about universal basic income because no one's going to have a job in the future. He was right, I believe. He was early, and he was not a particularly effective pitchman on that subject. And I think his framing didn't quite work. But somebody's going to figure out that framing in a way that I'm hopeful about. And then here's the last thing I'll say is that There's a really great phrase that young people are using, a word that young people are using to describe old people who use AI too much, and and just apply to AI in general, and that is clanker. They
Right.
say, "Don't be a clanker." This fucking clanker. Look at this clanker. There's a cultural allergy to the laziness and sort of digital simulation of life
Mhm.
that people in our generation and even millennials have been falling for among the youngest people. The youngest people are like, fuck this. And
Right.
I think that they see this stuff more clearly than we do, even as they are extremely literate in the tech and see its advantages. I think that they are very subtle thinkers on this stuff. And so I actually have an enormous amount of confidence in the sort of ethical values of young people and the way that they are super grossed out by this stuff in a way that gives me a lot of hope for the future.
That yes, I thank you because I can latch on to that too because if the youth say I mean it's their they have the most to lose, right? And if the youth save the world because they can see things clearly and we can't, I'll go with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's where I take my comfort. So
Jonathan, thank you for this. I know we went for a really long time, but I think we're all, this is one of these great interviews where we're all smarter at the end of it, and for what you sharing your knowledge and your experience, and you know, it's a complicated story in an absolutely batshit crazy moment. So
yeah,
I think
yeah,
most people in legacy media is not fully digesting the story. It's disappearing underneath every other distraction, no matter how catastrophic that distraction is that the Trump administration throws out. And it's probably, the second most important story to the actual whatever the catastrophe of the moment is. So thank you for
yeah,
clarifying it. Let's definitely do this again.
yeah. Would love to.
Especially when I start panicking again. But thank you again for being here, guys. 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 day at a time, one live at a time. That's how I try to get everybody to survive this, Jonathan. We just chunk through it and try to make it through the next 3 years. Thank you again,
All
my
right.
friend.
Thanks,
And I'll
Mitch.
see you
Appreciate
again
it.
soon. Take care,
Okay.
everybody. I'll see
See
you
ya.
all
Bye-bye.
tomorrow at 11:15. Be well. Take care.